Thank you for signing off. Okay. We should have had a number of special guests, and we'll see how that goes. And I don't think our speakers have to have too much introduction. I think most of us know them. But let me start with the easy one first. That's Michelle, and she's the marketing and sustainability executive of Polyoke. And she's also the chair lady of the Plastic Pact, which I think we know most of that, and she's great. Okay, moving on to Don then, head of packaging at Woolworths, and he spent most of his career in the packaging industry, but now he's jumped onto the retail side. But I just wanted to assure everybody that he is actually quite a nice guy. So not to worry about that. Okay, then just a few points of order. The session will be recorded. Okay, we are aiming to finish by 5 o'clock. Okay, if you have any questions, just to please put them into the chat box, and then we'll try and deal with them at the end. And we'll start with Michelle. So Michelle, over to you, if you would like to start, please.
Super, great, thank you. So as we know, the Interpak trade exhibition was held in Dusseldorf in Germany back in May, and I was lucky enough to attend. And in doing so, I just thought it might be of interest to the packaging community, some of the things that we saw there. And we've just tried to group those insights into 4 sort of themes, if you like. So I'll just cover them in that sort of order. 4 clear themes emerged for me. And of course, these are perspectives from a plastic packaging converter. I'm sure Don will be able to contribute more in terms of other substrates and, you know, the broader retail environment of what he noted there. The 4 themes are anti-plastic sentiment, which is closely tied to greenwashing, PCR, so post-consumer recyclate, and then the retail environment in Germany. So the first thing that I noticed, and this was in doing some store visits within the Edeka environment in Dusseldorf itself, was that some categories in this sort of condiments and dressings and sauces categories are still very, very glass oriented. In fact, these 2 categories were soulless glass categories. You know, there were no tin, no plastic, nothing else in those categories, and that struck me as quite odd. I don't know if it's a traditional thing, and bearing in mind obviously that this packaging is not reusable, you know, these are single-use sort of packaging items. And the same was true for dairy, you know, so walking in the fresh milk aisle in Germany, what really struck me in terms of observation was the large amount of glass on the fixture. In fact, almost more glass on the fixture than PET, and the rest is all in carton. So I thought that was a very interesting observation. And very stark compared to what I saw in the UK. So part of my trip was into the UK as well. And so just taking the same category and comparing those 2 fixtures side by side really shows how different these markets are. So in the UK, fresh milk is like almost 99% HD. Most of it, in fact, is natural HD. The bottles have all got foil seals on them. So, you know, I think our bottles in SA are actually doing extremely well because, you know, they don't leak when they're put on their side. We don't include a foil seal on the bottles. It's a really simple, effective design. And in the UK, there's not even a degree of PET. So very interesting. And so the insight I drew from this was really that the carbon emission reduction is less top of mind for consumers, you know,
Okay.
especially in that German
Now I need
market.
to look, and I can't see who
I
else
think,
is.
sorry, is someone's speaker on? Thank you. I think some, you know, what became clear is that in the German market, with that high prevalence of glass still on shelf, is that it sort of alluded to, you know, carbon emission reduction is certainly less top of mind for shoppers. And actually that the UK was doing very well in terms of their choice of HD in the fresh milk space. So this is a life cycle assessment that was done in Austria, actually in 2019. But and what this really shows is that HD has a lower carbon footprint even compared to 100% rPET, and certainly lower than the glass. The OW there, my German is not very good, but the OW there implies single use, and MW is reusable, multi-use. So, you know, those the glass, you know, for the sauces and jams and things, you know, very high carbon footprint, and yet it's still the preferred packaging substrate for those categories of products. Another category that struck me as interesting was the cereal aisle. So what we see in this aisle is a large scale move away from your traditional flexible sort of bags and your bag in box type of format, which we're quite used to on our local market. And there's this emergence of these composite tubes with sort of metal caps, and, you know, a lot of board and paper being used. And the marketing around this is all about the ocean, you know. So there's contributions being made to organizations that collect plastic seemingly out of the ocean. And so you get these claims on packs such as each can or tube represents 2 kilograms of plastic and waste in our oceans and water. So I thought that was quite interesting. And, you know, interesting in the backdrop of the facts that we know, you know, this plastics in the ocean really seems to be the key driver of the shopper and the purchase behavior, certainly in Germany, despite the fact that we know not even, or just 2% of all the plastic, marine plastic that comes from land actually is sourced or coming from Europe. Most of it is actually out of the Asia region. So it's very interesting that this is so top of mind for shoppers in Europe. And further to that, when we look at marine plastic, if you consider that globally, rigid plastic packaging comprises 41% of what's produced, it only represents 20% of what gets leaked into the ocean. And so we see formats that are multi-material, like your UHT cartons or your flexibles, that are, especially those that are multi-material, really over-indexing on what is leaked into the ocean. And so that for me was very interesting. And the last thing just around the anti-plastic sentiment is really, in Germany, it is so common and such a strong sentiment that you find products like this where, you know, this no plastic message is even communicated or interpreted as being important as an ingredient into the product. So here we have True Gum. True Gum is plastic-free chewing gum, and they make all sorts of claims about a plastic-free and biodegradable chewing gum. I actually bought some, and it had a really strange flavor, a really strange taste and texture. I mean, perhaps this is good for cleaning the gum off pavements if you're working for city council or so forth. I'm not too sure. But I thought that to me just epitomized this anti-plastic sentiment kind of on steroids. And shows also this misguided motivation. You know, so the Urban Dictionary now actually includes this new word, which is plastiphobia, and that's defined as the irrational and scientifically unsubstantiated fear of plastics in the environment. And the sense is certainly that in Germany, this is what's driving a lot of the anti-plastic sentiment. It's less about the concern around carbon emissions, but it's also in our own market. So this is a local execution. I found this example just on Facebook. The ad campaign was called Make the Switch, and this is encouraging consumers to switch from a PET water bottle to a carton of water. And, you know, when you rationally compare the two, the carton is not reusable, it's not biodegradable. Is it more recyclable? No. So we know in South Africa, maybe 10% of cartons are recycled versus the PET bottle, which is probably 60%. Is it cheaper? No, it's not. Yet there are still consumers that are making that switch. And you know, the assumption here is that they're being informed by this misguided notion that it is the more better environmental choice. And so even when you talk to consumers about, well, put the pollution sort of factor aside, let's talk about carbon emissions. And this was a study actually that was done in Cologne in Germany. So with that same sort of consumer base, and the question was, you know, what do you believe will make a big difference to reducing carbon emissions? And the majority of respondents, 22%, actually said, let's ditch the plastic carrier bag. So if we don't use plastic bags anymore, we believe that will be the greatest or the most impactful action that we can take to reduce carbon emissions. And the reality is that it's a factor of 3. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny impact on the carbon emission reduction. But in consumers' minds, you know, plastic is not only the source of all pollution, but it is also the source of the carbon emission reductions. And the reality is only 10% of consumers said, well, you know, perhaps if I eat less meat, that might make a difference. And, you know, here you can see that that would actually be the most impactful action that consumers could take. And so that touches nicely on this thing of greenwashing, which we saw a lot of at the show, starting with the graphics that were used on a lot of the exhibition stands. So this was a stand for metal packaging, with heavy use of these sort of infinity graphics, and the story being all about metal being infinitely recyclable. This is another one. This is a metal bucket and drum stand, silver. They make a lot of paint containers, and all over their stand was this messaging. You can't see it in the other half of the photo, but the messaging here is really all about microplastics kill the oceans. And so that to me really stood out as greenwashing when you consider the fact that the key source of microplastics is actually paint and coating particles, and the balance is really car tire particulates, you know, on the rubber, and of course your fabric fibers when you're washing your clothes or you're using a tumble dryer, etc. And actually only a small portion of that accounts for plastic packaging. So there really is this notion that, you know, plastic is the source of all microplastics. Some of the paper stands had graphics, you know, with sort of messaging like reduce plastics and microplastics, choose a sustainable production, promote full recyclability, you know, and again, that stands out as greenwashing, given the fact that we know from the CSIR studying in our own local market 2 or 3 years ago that the most sustainable option in terms of carrier bags wasn't the paper bag. It was in fact the 70 micron reusable plastic carrier bag. And so the insight here for me was, look, we need system change. We don't merely need material substitution. Any pack can be a single-use pack, whether that's a beverage can or a glass bottle or a paper carton or a plastic bottle. The other thing that I noticed in both the German and the UK market was the distinct lack of refill stations in store. You know, the food lovers type model where you go in with your own packaging and you choose what you want and you kind of buy by your own weight. With all the noise that we hear, I was very surprised, especially in the UK, to find those as mass methods in store. In fact, you had to look really hard. I found one store that was dedicated to refill, and it really was a health food sort of store. And there was only one in the whole town, so that was interesting. And that was in stark contrast. You know, if you look in markets like Kenya, these things are reasonably common, but they're very poorly executed in store. And you know, seeing them raises a lot of concerns about food safety. But the benefit of the model is, of course, that people can decide exactly how much they want to spend. They're not stuck on specific predetermined price points because they can determine exactly how much or how little of the product they want to buy. Also a lot of greenwashing in terms of the on-pack messaging. So here you have a bag in a box for water. This is 8-liter bag in box for water, plastered with messaging, you know, all about 60% less plastic per liter. And it wasn't quite clear to me whether the bag inside the box was recyclable itself. But just it felt like there's a couple of trigger words, you know, as soon as consumers, certainly in this market, see less plastic, it's like, well, okay, this is the safer choice. Here's another one. This is on home care products. That little label says this product contributes to the reduction of environmental stress. Quite a dubious claim, and of course it's allegedly under the endorsement of WWF, so greenwashing again. This was an interesting example in the window cleaning product aisle, and again you see these claims: 91% less plastic, microplastic free, and it wasn't quite clear, does that actually refer to the product inside, or is that related to the packaging? And then this interesting claim of refillable 11 times. So, you know, if the refills are actually recyclable in this instance, it's a good solution, I thought. And the price points were also suitable to get that switch. Very often we see the refill packs being more expensive per gram than buying the pack fresh. But in this instance, the economics work, and the greenwashing claim in this case was this gold packaging standard of cradle to cradle certified, and I had no idea exactly what that meant. Lots of carbon neutral claims as well. So here's one on a UHT milk bottle, and this claim is carbon neutral, sort of certified. And when you go into the detail, it's to do with offsets. So what this company done, this is Interpak, I think it was, is they fund water wells and planting mangroves in Kenya and those sort of projects. I think they do some work in Ghana as well. And in that way, they get to put this carbon neutral accreditation on their packaging. More carbon neutral claims. So this one was for innocent drinks, but in the German market. And this claim is again 100% CO2 neutral. But again, it's unclear of whether that carbon neutral claim refers to the manufacturing facility or the juice or the actual packaging. So a little bit vague. And this brand was actually taken to the Advertising Standards Authority in 2021 in the UK, and forced to remove what was determined to be misleading messaging to consumers. So it does seem that there's, you know, a growing concern and a clampdown on some of these greenwashing messaging. More UHT carton claims. So this one is a Tetra Pak, and that little claim there says buying this Tetra carton helps you care for the world's forests. So again, interestingly, probably 50% of the surface area of this pack were all full of these sort of claims. Again, a lot of it's in German, but you kind of get the gist of what it's saying. More again on UHT cartons, lots of claims here, green energy in our production, 100% electricity from renewable energy sources, 0% waste. Again, it was very unclear. Well, what exactly does that mean? And packaging from renewable materials. That seems to be the theme that I picked up on a lot of the paper packaging and the carton sort of packaging as well. This was one carton that I picked up in the UK, in the milk fixture, which is very unusual. And this one is claiming less plastic for a better future. So again, very aggressive, overt greenwashing claims in some of these categories. The other thing that I picked up, there were big stands by raw material suppliers like your Sabex and your Braschems of the world. And of course, we know Braskem does the bioplastic derived from sugarcane. They're based in Brazil. And it was very interesting for me to see, this is actually the Braskem stand, and they used Interpak to launch this We Knew brand. And that is all about what they call advanced recycling, which is chemical recycling. So this recognition that, look, in terms of circularity, it's not just about packaging, whether it be paper or tin or whatever. It's really about all the chemicals that we use. And there was a lot of promotion of chemical recycling to be able to replace traditional fossil feedstocks for polymers with recycled content, either through mechanical recycling or through biomass, so your bioplastics, or indeed through chemically recycled plastic, so plastic back into plastic again. The next theme was around PCR, so and particularly in secondary packaging. So, there was a bit of PCR in primary packaging, but it just feels like the European market is quite far ahead on that track. It's not uncommon to see 100% rPET for sodas and even milk bottles, etc. And so the focus, certainly at Interpak, that we observed was that it is now turning to secondary packaging, and you see everything from 50% post-consumer recycled outer wrap, for multi-packs, there's recycled pallet wrap, recycled tape, even paper-based tape. So it's really looking at, what are the other areas that you can take this recycled product into. Multi-pack carry handles. So this is something that I didn't see in our market. So in fact, moving away even from those plastic outer wraps to this sort of device, which is of course made from 100% recycled HD. And that extends also to these foil labels on some of the sodas, so really this drive for recycled content on all substrates, which is a good thing. And this was interesting. So of course, the UK and Europe are in their drive to roll out tethered closures. And I was very pleased to see that these were done with communications on pack. So I have seen some research that has said, if you just put the tethered closures out there, consumers don't necessarily understand why the design of the closures have necessarily changed. And so they get a bit irritated and they think that it's a design fault, etc. So really, along with the rollout of tethered closures, there needs to be some kind of communication, which was done very well here, I thought. And then lastly, the retail environment. So this was a great example. I was so encouraged to see, that there were retailers, certainly in the German market, that understood the impact and the importance and the potential of using the in-store environment to reduce their carbon footprint. So most of the chillers throughout the whole store had these doors to lock in the refrigeration and obviously reduce their emissions. And there was a whole story around carrier bags as well. So this is in the Edeka store in Germany, and it's a plastic carrier bag, but there's a whole story on the bag about the circular nature of the carrier bag, and lots of plastic carrier bags in the UK as well. And the notion here is all about, you know, here's the bag, either you've bought it or you get it for free, but guess what, when it breaks, we will replace it free of charge. And that was across these two different retailers. One is Lidl, and that says if the bag gets damaged, we'll recycle and replace it for free. So I thought that was quite an interesting execution of the carrier bag. In the fresh produce category, this is back in the German market, very little plastic. So very much the feel of the old style greengrocer, lots of paper. You know, I mean, this is literally string tying these vegetables together. So very interesting. And then this is the UK example of trying to do away with the fresh fruit bags that you have your stuff weighed in, and moving toward this reusable fresh fruit bags, which obviously you buy at a low price, but the intent is that you then go ahead and reuse those. And lastly, this for me was a very interesting execution, because obviously there are some substrates that, as we know, either because they're multi-layer or they're flexible, have a long way to go to make them not only circular, but suitable for recycling. And your crisp market, your confectionery biscuits, a lot of those categories, a lot of those products fall in this category. And so on this pack was this little logo, and it just said, recycle with bags at large supermarket. Don't recycle at home. So this was a really interesting execution of, okay, you know, as a brand owner, maybe your packaging can't be recycled in the existing stream, you know, with your curbside collection, but you know, this is a great partnership of the retailers and brands coming together and saying, well, you know, let's get consumers or shoppers to bring their stuff back to store, and they will there at that point consolidate the recycling and get it off to where it needs to go to for whatever specialist recycling is required. And that was it. That was my observations.
Wow, thanks very much, Michelle. Very, very interesting. And yeah, it's actually also quite concerning that, you know, there doesn't always seem to be the, you know, the round amount of intelligence applied to you know, what is supposed to happen and what is actually the best. But I think you've highlighted some very interesting aspects, and thank you very much. Okay, Don, over to you. Don? There you are. Are you? Don, we can't hear you. Don?
Don just needs to unmute himself.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Does he?
Okay, guys, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
now we can.
You can hear me. Okay, that
We can. Yes, great.
I'm
Thanks.
going to see whether I can get this thing into presentation mode. Can everybody see it?
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Don.
Perfect. Thank you, Alan. That was done especially for you to make you nervous.
I'm not nervous,
Okay.
Don.
Okay. So thank you. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for allowing me to share my perspective of Interpak, which happened in May in Dusseldorf. I want to make sure that the slides are moving on and that you can see it. If somebody can just give me an indication.
Yes, they are.
Okay, so this year's theme was Welcome Home, because it had been 6 years since the packaging fraternity as a collective had got together under the banner of Interpak. So it was a great show. It was some numbers. It had 20 halls and 140,000 visitors from 156 countries, 2,807 exhibitors from 61 countries. Yeah. And it opened on the 4th of May at 10 o'clock. I punched my ticket for the duration of the show. So I was there from the 4th to the 10th of May. I punched my ticket on the 4th of May at 2 minutes past 10. That was the earliest I could get in, and demonstrated my enthusiasm to getting back to being involved in the packaging fraternity globally again. I've got 4 trends and then a final concern, which is very much along the lines of what Michelle had indicated, but I'm going to talk through the 4 major trends at Interpak this year in Dusseldorf.
Okay.
So the first one is sustainability. So I would hazard a guess that at least 60% of the 2,800 exhibitors there had something to do with sustainability, or they called out sustainability on their booths, or simply their booths were green to demonstrate the fact that they were working on a journey or walking towards consideration for the planet, which is really great, but there are concerns around it. So everything, as you walked into, you could see welcome home, and you see the what's his name up there, the whoops, I didn't want to, you can see the green choice, and two stands that I took pictures of, the one of a processing facility and packing facility, where they call out facility, call out sustainability, and then also machinery with regard to being green and the way it's manufactured and the amount of energy and things it used to talk to that whole sustainability journey. So it was green. Sustainability was undoubtedly the #1 trend at Interpak this year. I've got on either side, and Alan's going to share these slides with you, on either side, some of the call outs that the beverage industry were making with regard to its sustainability claims. A lot of reduction and elimination of plastics, like the Carlsberg beer there, and like Michelle alluded to, the tethered closure, where the cap is always tied to the bottle, because bottles are so widely and recycled in such huge volumes, and yet caps are one of the most popular things found on beaches. The rationale behind it is simply to tie the cap to the bottle. So when the bottle gets recycled in those huge high numbers, that you take the cap with it. And so you'll find Coca-Cola has completely shifted to this in Europe, in Germany certainly, and you'll find a number of other big brands, and even some of the smaller, lesser brands that have tethered closure. There's an international EU standard for the strengths that the tether has to be. In other words, to prevent the consumer from actually taking it off the bottle. South African bottle manufacturers, and I know certainly Polyoak, are looking at tethered closures under their African closures division. So, like I said, undoubtedly the single biggest trend at Interpak this year was sustainability. Sustainability is no longer standalone. You know, you can't go to a little area and say this is sustainability. It encompasses everything, not just raw materials, but includes how packaging is made, where packaging is made, what machines, who runs those machines. So you'll find those narratives being spoken on the booths of Interpak to demonstrate that everybody has got this planet Earth in the back of their minds. And when they design and develop, it's in consideration with the planet. There is a not so nice side to that as well. It's overwhelming and it needs, and those that have got it right have used large sums of collaboration. You're considering a sustainability journey for your brand or your business, it cannot be done on its own. If you do it on its own, it will be fraught with pitfalls and a lot of expenses as you make the mistakes. So it's important that there's this collaboration centered around sustainability. Our view, Woolworths' view, is that collaboration is key and that sustainability is no longer a competition. The competition or the race is not about who puts out green and sustainable solutions on shelf, rather that we collectively put out green and sustainable solutions on shelf collectively. The race is actually to save the planet and not to who gets one better over the other. Flexible packaging and, more important, multi-layer structures received a high volume of focus at Interpak. So those who were supplying bags and wraps and pouches and everything to do with flexible packaging was by far the biggest leader in packaging spectrum when you talk about carton boxes and bottles, tin cans, aluminium foil cans, flexible packaging, your bags and wraps was an area that got a huge amount of focus. And the reason that focus is there is because multi-layer structures and flexible packaging in general is very difficult to recycle. Informal sectors in South Africa that go out and collect it, they're not going to bend over 1 million times to pick up something and end up with 10 kilograms, because most of our recycling is done at landfills and from your bin on bin day. So they rather look for the stuff where they're going to get higher value and more money when they go to the buyback centers. So in South Africa, multi-layer and flexible packaging is a serious problem. So too, the challenge in Europe, because multi-layer structures are made up of so many different kinds of polymers, you don't know where to put it. There's no one place to go and say, this is a lamination for a frozen food, fillet, hake, steak. I can put it there. This is a lamination for dry powdered beans or something like that. I can put it over there. It's so varied and so different that it becomes a challenge and a headache to actually get it recycled. So that received a high volume of focus at Interpak. Sadly, it's still a competitive thing, even though everybody talks and say collaboration is key, and people make statements like everybody collectively got the planet to where it is now, and therefore collectively we need to work to get the planet out of where it is now. So they talk those things, but yet there's still this competition. There's an Oatly pack that on the one side you'll see they put their carbon footprint and their numbers on there, and they challenge guys in the opposite side of it with HDPE milk cans to do the same. And they'll make statements like, we've paid for a double page ad. The one side we talk about yourselves. How's it you come and talk about yourself, about your green credentials? So there's still that lively competition, good thing or a bad thing, but you'll find that amongst the stands and the booths at Interpak, where there's this healthy or unhealthy competition. But sustainability, sadly, in my opinion, is still seen as a competition to gain one over another. So just quickly, while I have the thing, I'll show you some of the shifts that we've made in the flexible packaging industry, where we've taken a triple lamination of traditional coffee bags, which was polyester, aluminium foil, and polyethylene all joined together to provide the protection for the coffee. We went to an all polypropylene structure and got noticed. That's me, by the way, showing my coffee bag there at a stand in Dusseldorf, Germany at Interpak. So we got a number of, likewise, this one was also at Interpak. This is our shift away from a multi-polyolefin structure, polyprop and polyethylene joined together to form the barrier for our muesli range, and we shifted it all to a mono structure, all polyethylene structure. So you know these structures you can now recycle with an ordinary bread bag or fruit bag or shroud that goes around 18 toilet rolls. So you'll find this kind of initiatives all over the booths with flexible packaging manufacturers at Interpak. So to our sources, that shifted across from multi-layer structures into monopolyethylene layers. And this is where the collaboration goes in, where you understand the organoleptic requirements of your product. You understand what you want and how you want it to look on shelf. You know what your filling equipment is in your own factory. And you collaborate with the packaging manufacturer to design and develop a solution for you. And this is where the school fees gets paid, etc. This is just 3 areas where we have shifted away from traditional multi-layer structures that are not recyclable. We've done to date 520 tons of this shift away from multi-layer polymer and multi-layer polymer with aluminium foil and some with paper. We've shifted away to mono structures that are now recycle ready in South Africa. And here's the big thing. And little do you know that South Africa are the world leaders in making this shift. South Africa is the world's leading country in the shift from multi-layer structures into monopolymer recycle-ready structures. And it was confirmed by many international packaging converter at Interpak. And there's a reason for that. It's because this form of packaging is 99% of the time coming from outside of the borders of South Africa. So here's a challenge to South African packaging manufacturers, and especially those that ply their trade in the flexible industry, to step up to the plate and produce these award-winning multi-layer alternates in South Africa, as opposing brand owners to go outside. But we are the world leaders in South Africa with a shift, both in tonnage as well as the diverse number of product types in these packaging. The second biggest trend was the re-emergence of paper. Now, this was also overwhelming, and a lot of talk about the re-emergence of paper packaging as a primary pack source. And when I say primary pack source, I mean packaging that goes in direct contact with the food. Paper, for many years and traditionally, have been tertiary and secondary packaging. Corrugated boxes or solid board cartons and liners get put in there, like for breakfast cereals or teas and things like that. But this is paper drawing a line in the stand and stepping up to the plate and emerging as a primary packaging material source. So you'll find the vertical form-fill seal application, you'll find bags. And there was some pineapple chunks that they gave out at Interpak. It didn't taste so great. Maybe it's got German taste profiles, but be that as it may, it's packed on a vertical form-fill seal, a paper structure with a barrier component on there that still renders it recyclable. Likewise, horizontal flow wraps, where the traditional polypropylene chocolate bars, whether it's Mars or Kit Kat or whatever it is, shifting across to paper and running on horizontal form-fill seal flow wrap machines. Horizontal vacuum thermoforming machines running thermoformable paper bases, and then either putting a paper lidding that's printed with the product or a see-through plastic layer. But paper, you see, is shifting away from being just tertiary and secondary packaging, stepping up to become a primary packaging force to be reckoned with. Paper, tackling very different arenas, like you see the Mondi wrap. This area of business is dominated by plastic pallet wrap, whether it's automatic or whether it's hand. Paper is starting to make inroads in that area. Imagine your goods arriving at your warehouse and it's wrapped in paper as opposed to plastic. It makes a lot of people happy. It is a trend where paper is now shifting into paper, the traditional alternates to a six-pack container, the hug and hold concept, and even Coca-Cola jumping on the bandwagon to put 6 cans of cool drink into a paper hold it all. And then there's the innovation, like I demonstrated here from something I found in Germany with 2 kilograms of potatoes in there. And here's the big, amazing shift, and you will all remember it, and I remember it as well, because I relocated from Cape Town to Johannesburg and spent a couple of years in Johannesburg when Unilever shifted from carton boxes into flexible packaging for powdered laundry detergents. And the reverse is happening now. It started with Earthwise type of greeny type laundry powders, but it's catching on. And soap powders it's not uncommon to be found in Germany back in carton boxes. So paper is clawing back. I would caution that you look and you exercise good oversight when you decide to ship, as opposed to run blind and make the shift. Look at the overall impact on the environment, look at carbon footprint, look at recyclability, look at efficiencies in the factory, look at how this best fits. And when you do make the shift and follow this trend that paper is doing in the world today, that you've done your homework and that you don't come unstuck. A lot of it happening in our stores as well. We've shifted from polystyrene into corrugated board trays. Likewise with our tomatoes and our on-the-go foods, we've shifted away from PET and polypropylene trays to nestle our wraps. We've shifted into all paper. We've shifted some of our PE bags and boards into a box, 2 kg box of tomatoes. And our latest acquisition in line with our paper shift is the shift of our pastas, traditionally polypropylene laminates, into paper. And those have hit the market about 2-3 months ago. So we're in there, right there, checking out what paper is doing. But we always have an overlay to make sure that these paper that we bring into South Africa are being recycled in South Africa. Often some of the papers that you get that's being recycled in Europe cannot be recycled in South Africa. So just be aware of that. Europe has abundance of water as well as energy, even though there was a little time when it wasn't so stable, but it's back and stable again. So they've got water and energy, and water and energy is what recycles paper. You need a mass amount of water and you need a high volume of energy to keep those repulpers going. In South Africa, with shortages of both energy and paper and water, we find that we're selective about what we recycle. So when you do decide to shift to paper, I would caution you to ensure that it is being recycled in South Africa, that you don't bring in paper that's enhanced, that cannot be recycled. And some of the reasons why paper is making those gains is because of plastic pollution. People are tired of shouting about plastic pollution. You see them disrupting major sporting events. You see them chucking world famous paintings with all kinds of things. So people are starting to react. And what the world is doing, unfortunately, is they're looking at the reaction as opposed to the reason why people are playing out this way. So plastic pollution is not being addressed, and especially in that flexible space, plastic pollution is not being addressed as effectively and as fast as it should be in major countries in the world, not only in South Africa. Plastic is fossil fuel based, and people know that climate change is embedded in fossil fuel. The burning of fossil fuel, burning of natural gas, and the use of coal is what causes greenhouse gases. And so people are looking for alternate renewable sources, not the non-renewable. So those are just two of the reasons why people are starting to shift into paper. There are a number of others, and I'm going to leave you guys, when you get the presentation, to go through them. But again, I caution you that you always have the overlay of the life cycle analysis, the carbon emissions, and make sure you read the fine print carefully with regard to these papers, that you don't become stuck with something. The third biggest trend was digital technology. Digital technology is everywhere. People want to scan their packs and they want to know about it. We want to use it, and German and European brand owners are interacting with their customers online. At any hour when you go to the store and you want to buy this muesli and you're not sure and you want to ask a question, simply scan the QR code and immediately there's a pop-up that says, "Guten Tag, how can I help you?" And you can start interacting with them right there. We need to bring that technology into South Africa. We want to tell our stories. The German guys are telling their stories. There were adequate amount of stands and booths providing packages where you can implement that links to your pack that has an individual and very specific code that then talks to you. You get to know your customers better. You can run promos. You gather data about who it is that's buying your product and what that profile is of the customer. The stats at one of the stands I went to was simply mind-blowing, where they showed a pack that was on the shelf in Germany, and they had 2,500 people that had interacted with it via the QR code, the questions they asked, and what the specific person's profile is and why they bought it. Data is the new thing of retail, certainly, but data is king. And so digital packaging, and we need South African guys to bring in this technology where brand owners can place these things and go through this. I was going to show a video, but it was just a bit above my ability to master PowerPoint and interaction with videos. So I decided to leave it. I will attach it to my presentation when I send it to Alan, and you can have a look at it as well, just to see the power of the type of information that you can get if our packaging suppliers and guys that know and understand data, if they can develop software like they got in Europe and like they were showing at Interpak. I didn't purposely put those that were offering it simply because I don't want to create an uncompetitive environment. Food waste and food safety was next in line, massive. And it's driven by the consumer pressure to use less packaging. It's driven by evolution and shift to recyclable. It's driven by the race to be first. It's driven by not enough R&D and trials being done. It's driven by the need to have a plug-and-play solution. And it's failing in some instances because brand owners are putting their products on shelf prematurely. They're not getting the shelf life. They're not getting the safety. They're not getting what they used to get when they were doing the non-recyclable, whatever they were doing before. But what they are getting is increased food safety and food waste. And so designers at Interpak were talking about these 4 reasons about the pressures that consumers put brand owners, and they were designing solutions that make it easier to implement and have a plug-and-play solution to say, I'm taking out this non-recyclable packaging, I'm taking out this carbon-heavy packaging, and I'm replacing it with this. This has been tried and tested. It's a plug-and-play solution. I can go there and do it. But food waste and food safety was high on the agenda at Interpak, largely because of these top 4 things that brand owners get pressurized into. Greenwashing, and I was so glad when I saw Michelle talk about greenwashing, because it's a challenge. It was actually a shock for me. In many ways, South Africans know more about the environment than, at least in theory, know more about the environment than the average European consumer does. So greenwashing is rife. People making unsupported claims. And there's no legislation other than the fact that Australia is starting to draft and put together legislation that's going to penalize brand owners when they greenwash. So be careful about what you put on your pack, how you articulate what you're doing, how your journey is evolving, and what you say. Be careful about it, because it's a challenge that is brought out from sustainability. And if I say 55 and 60% of everybody at Interpak had something to say about sustainability, there was a fair amount of them that were talking untruths and building stands for thousands of people to come and view on a non-truth. Knowingly, I think, in my opinion, sometimes, and sometimes pretty unknowingly, which still cannot be excused, because if you're going to Interpak and you put up a stand that's going to talk about packaging and the environment, you must have done your homework. A lot of those things are now filtering into South Africa, and I would urge brand owners, retailers, and packaging manufacturers to be mindful of greenwashing, to do the due diligence, to put together a panel, to talk to people. In South Africa, we have a culture that we collaborate around sustainability. We share and we talk about it openly because we see it as a non-competitive activity that is better for them. I'm going to show you one pack which I was very disappointed in. I went into a health shop in Germany. I bought this. It's yogurt in a paper cup with a paper lid. And there was a whole story about it, and the paper and the natural, and the yogurt itself is all natural. It's got no artificial sweetness and all the bad stuff around it. It's a beautiful thing. It's positioned in a health shop. I found it there. I ate the yogurt. I came back to the hotel and I being the packaging person that I am, I dissected the pack because I wanted to see what is inside it. How do they manage to pack yogurt in here and position it on shelf with a 2.5-week shelf life? And lo and behold, this is, whoops. Let me see, why is this there? Man, this is, I'm going to see if I can just momentarily, if I can just take this thing out there and then reshare that slide. And that's what I found, that the orange background is the couch in my hotel room. There's the paper stripped off, inside a styrene little bowl. So the yogurt is actually packed in styrene, masked with paper, positioned in a health shop as the answer to everything. And people that don't know will buy it, and they will frown on when they go to other stores to look at yogurts that are packed in plastic. Little do they know that their yogurt is also packed in plastic. That's just one of many examples where I think, in my opinion, brand owners purposely mislead consumers. And we find it here in South Africa as well. So be careful about it. There are places for biofilms and bio and compostable and biodegradable packaging in South Africa. I do believe there's a place for those things. There's a place for every packaging format and type, but there's no place in the world for this kind of blatant greenwashing. So be careful about it. And like I say again, it's still perceived as a competition outside of South Africa. So be careful about that. When you do get to engage with European and international suppliers, they often see their films and their solutions as a silver bullet. Be wary of that. Thank you very much. And I'll hand you over back to Alan. Alan, you're on mute.
That'll help, yes. Don, Michelle, thank you very, very much. That was extremely interesting, and common themes coming from both of you. I would just say that in South Africa, hopefully we apply the common sense. Good to hear from you, Don, that we are doing well and ahead, and one of the best. We know that on the recycling side, but for you to confirm what you have, I think that was really good. And yeah, I'm not sure if we're going to have much time to take too many of the questions, but if we can have a look in there and see if there are any questions that anyone would like to ask. Is there anything? Possibly just come off.
Somebody, I think it's Rachel, asked the question about bottled iced coffees or tea, particularly for Woolworths.
Can you answer, please, Don?
I'm not sure what the question specifically, but we've got iced teas and we've got iced coffees in I think PET bottles with a PETG at the moment. But shortly we will be shifting away from PETG shrink sleeves, and those shrink sleeves renders the entire PET bottle non-recyclable. Recyclers like Extrapet and Zebo don't want PET bottles with PETG shrink sleeves, and we're shifting to the all new, what they call floatable polypropylene or polyolefin shrink sleeve. It's just been approved, and you'll see it shortly on our iced teas. And yeah, through the SA Plastics Pact, we worked, and Michelle at Polyoak had a hand in getting those approved at recyclers. So yeah, we need to have a sleeve on there because iced tea doesn't always look so nice. It has a tendency to separate in the bottle, and it's also light sensitive. So therefore, we have a full-bodied shrink sleeve around it to protect the product, but certainly no longer a PETG shrink sleeve. I'm not sure if that answers the question. There's another question about PVDC coatings, and I can answer that. So many of the laminates that we replaced, the multi-layer laminates where there was sometimes aluminum foil, or sometimes PVDC, or silica oxide, or some of the many other coatings that enhanced polymers and enhanced recycling or prevented recycling. We shifted away and we replaced it largely with EVOH. PVDC is a no-go. We don't do it. That's a personal thing at Woolworths, but we have EVOH. We've got it from recyclers in South Africa, that if you keep your EVOH content to a maximum of 5 or less than 5% of the overall structure, then it will still be recycled in the said stream. So if you've got a polyethylene EVOH structure, we'll go into polyethylene, provided the EVOH is 5% to the max. Same with polypropylene as well. Here's the thing is the commercial aspects of EVOH are terrible. So you want to design and develop to ensure that you curtail and keep EVOH to a maximum of 5% of your structure. Otherwise, it becomes gold. The shelf life for the coffee, the polypropylene coffee bag, was asked by John. That has got an EVOH leak in there. I'll send you a couple of packs, John. We actually got a better shelf life. And that speaks to two things. One, that the traditional aluminium foil was always an overkill. And two, that we were getting a lot of pinholing during flexing of the aluminium foil. And the best way to prevent aluminium foil from flexing and developing pinholes is to back it with a polyamide. Polyamide has the ability to prevent pinholing in aluminium foil. And when you take away polyamide from a multi-layer structure, like a coffee bag, you get pinholing. Pinholing then has got no barrier. And therein lies your ingress of your oxygen and your moisture through a traditional multi-layer coffee bag. With EVOH, you don't get that kind of flexing and disruption of the barrier. So we're getting a better product overall with regard to our coffees. Just scanning the chat and seeing if there's any other questions, but I don't see any. But yeah, thank you again, Alan, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Don. Well, I just really want to say thanks. If there's nothing else from the floor, thank you both very, very much. You know, Michelle, you did an excellent job as we would expect. Don, you outdid yourself. That's all I can say.
Thank you, John. I see your hand, and thank you, Alan, for the invitation. Thank you, everybody.
So, yeah, I have license to say that, Don, so just for everyone. And so really, thank you very much. I would just like to take this opportunity before we log off, is in line with a lot of what we've spoken about, is that it's International Beach Cleanup Day on the 16th of September. Okay. Last year, we were extremely badly represented at the cleanup. Okay, I know there was companies like Polyoak and others that did their own, but I just want to put it out there. Please put that in your diaries now, and also, you know, your mother-in-laws and children and everybody else. Let's get out there. We can't just say we care about the environment. We must show and do that we do. And so I'd just like to make that appeal right now. And if we can spread that message, that'll be great. I will coordinate for the Western Cape here, Cape Town particularly, and then we'll also possibly do in the Port Elizabeth area as well. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And I think really just to end off then, thanks once again to all of you, and thanks to our speakers. I mean, wow, I think you both did a fantastic job. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you for the opportunity. All right.
Thanks, Ed. Cheers.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.